Hi there, and thanks for listening to the Adulting is Easy podcast, where we make adulting easier by making money easier. This is your host, Lauren, and I have one ask of you this week. Please rate and review when you're done listening. 5 stars preferred. I'm joined today by Chad, aka Chad Money Matters. He's passionate about teaching folks how to do more with less financially. Chad and his family are building wealth on a modest salary of less than 60,000 US dollars, and he's showing on social media how they do it so you can do it too. Thank you, Chad, so much for joining me.
Hey, thanks for inviting me on. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited, and I want to let everybody know that this episode is brought to you by Steadily Landlord Insurance. Please go to the link in the show notes to support this podcast. Steadily covers so many different kinds of properties: single family, multifamily, vacant, restorations, apartment buildings, condos, and even manufactured homes. They covered Airbnbs and VRBOs as well. If you rent property to others, like I said, you can truly support this podcast by clicking the link in the show notes and getting a quote. And thanks to everybody who did in the last month or two since we've been having Steadily as our sponsor. Our goal for today is to make adulting easier for listeners by discussing a personal finance topic, since managing money is a big part of adulting. So today, Chad, you and I are going to talk about how a family of 4 can thrive on a modest salary. So we heard in your bio that you're living off of less than $60,000, but are you actually able to save and invest on top of that as well?
So that's our whole number. So that's like every single dollar that comes in is encompassed in that number. So from that number, we typically will be able to live off of around about 40,000 of that. That's like all bills in and out. So this year we're on pace to save about 20,000. Last year we actually saved a little bit more. There were some things that had happened last year. We had some like extra taxes hit for us, and then there was the stimulus checks and things like that. We actually saved over 30,000 last year. So last year was 30, this year was 20. Very similar salaries each year, but this year. For those that don't know, is we have a newborn. You might be able to pick him up crying in the background occasionally here on this, but he was born in August, so there's some expenses, tied into that. There's some medical costs and things like that we've still been able to do very, very well this year, but that's actually going to be why that number is slightly down this year. I say down like with an asterisk. We're very happy to be able to doing what we're doing on our income. So.
That's amazing. And that is why I wanted to bring you here, Chad, and everybody, is because something that we hear a lot, and certainly on money Twitter especially, it's there's very flashy salaries. Myself and my husband included, we have very good salaries and things like that. And people think I can't get to where you are because I don't have that salary. And I think sometimes forget that my first job out of school, I made $28,000 and I bought a house that year, right? Like it's totally possible to do more with less, but I wanted to bring you on, Chad, because you're doing it right now and you have kids, which is something I can't even think about. So is this like through budgeting? Are you guys like hardcore budgeters?
So we were never really like hardcore into budgeting, but since I was just like a little kid, we weren't born into like this like super wealthy family. As a matter of fact, I think one of the things that made me so frugal or good with money, or whatever you would call it, is my mom went through a really traumatic experience with my dad. They were both working. I think my mom was at like J.C. Penney's or Sears or something along those lines, or she just sold like shoes, like very normal, wife job at the time, 30 years ago or so. And my dad worked in a machine shop. We actually had a brain aneurysm, and my mom was set with 3 kids and had to do everything. So she was mom, she was dad, she was the whole kit and caboodle, and she was doing it on a salary of a shoe salesman from Sears, or one of those big box stores. And but she always just instilled on us that you could be happy and still save money. And so just growing up like that, we just continued to evolve that process that we learned when we were younger. And I think those early seeds, which maybe we'll talk about later with some of the things that I'm doing with my daughter who's 11, and I'll deal with my son when he's, old enough, is they're watching you. So just like I watched my mom struggle through those moments, um, my daughter's seeing us take money to the bank, put off that payment, not upgrade the car for so long, just those things like that. Delaying some of those gratifying moments, those have been the biggest thing for us. So it's definitely not been about pinching pennies. It's been more so about being content with what we have, and that's allowed us to put more money in the savings account.
Yeah, that's incredible. And so your wife, did she grow up similarly? Was she naturally frugal as well, or is this something that you kind of had to bring her around to?
So I wouldn't say like naturally frugal. We just neither one were like overspenders, and
Okay.
so uh, she would always save money, and I was very much a saver, and so it was more of a natural, just like let me slide her further in this direction. We've always had fairly traditional roles in our home, and she's always just kind of like let me manage the money of the household, and it's worked out really well for us. But we've also always been on the same page. It's not just been like, hey, uh, you know, I put all our money in crypto and we don't have anything. It's been, we sit down at the dinner table and we talk about like, hey, this is what's going on. This is how much money we saved this month. So it's a regular conversation and we are on the same page. Even if it's, one person handling the money, I think the main thing is the other person still has to be as equally involved in the process.
Yeah, I like that, sliding her more in that direction.
Yeah.
That's what I'll think of with my husband, because I think I had to kind of do the same thing
It's almost
when I
always
met
the
him.
one. It's almost always the one person finds the exact opposite person, personality trait. So
It seems that way. And like you said, it goes down to, I think, how you were brought up, what you were observing. I certainly knew when I was a kid that my parents and I had this idea that they were being, quote unquote, being cheap, right? So I knew that there was more money than was being spent. I knew deep down that when they were telling me no to something, it wasn't because they couldn't, right? It was
yes,
because they wouldn't get me that thing. And so,
for
and
sure.
I don't know how I knew that, but I just did. And so that brings me to my question about your daughter, right? Your son is like 3 months old, so we'll
Yeah,
leave him out of this for now. But
for now.
so your daughter being 11, does she understand that it's not that like you couldn't upgrade your car? It's that you're choosing not to do that, and you're making these choices. And does she understand kind of why, like for the future or for vacations or things like that?
Yeah, exactly. I think she's in like her coming of age moment for sure, and she's like arriving at this because she's very into like she's on TikTok and she's watching all these trends, and the trends tend to be, the Lululemon leggings and the Balenciaga shoes and purses or whatever, and it's just one of
Nice.
those things that like you have to temper those expectations on her end that we could go out and buy those types of things for her, but we absolutely will not because we'd be out of money. It would just drain us. So I think we do a really good job of explaining like, yes, I can buy that. I can probably buy it 5 times over, but I could also buy something very similar that's going to cost exponentially less, last as equally as long, and be very content with it and not necessarily need the name brand thing or the next big thing. So I think for me, doing that with her, she's now learning like, dad's not going to buy me everything. It's going to be up to me if I want something, that's maybe out of the realm of possibility on his end. I'm going to have to save it. And it's kind of teaching her how to save her money and delay her own gratification too.
You said that she definitely is observing you, definitely watching what you're doing with money, understands that you're putting off certain purchases for good reason and things like that. What kinds of conversations are you having with her around money? Like, do you talk to her about it? How often
Yeah.
does she ask questions?
So there's like two things. So my grandpa, used to like, he would come pick me up, right? And we would go for a car ride. We would go, he lived in the next town over, so it's like a 20-minute drive. And we would get in the car, and he would always have these extremely awkward talks with me. And it was always like, son, if you ever do drugs, I just won't be there. And you know the ones that come from grandpa. I do that now with my daughter, and she despises it. But when she's 30, she's gonna be like, dude, those talks were great. My dad saved me so much money, because they are awkward. They are a difficult conversation, but they are absolutely necessary. Like, you could get in your car and drive down. We have a gas station 2 minutes from the house or whatever, but it's also a 15-minute walk. So it's healthy. We needed to go there to grab something real quick. And that gave me a 15-minute window to have a conversation with my daughter about just like some money stuff that was popping up. And it specifically revolves around a job change that's about to happen in the next couple of days that not many people actually know about. So, but what I was telling her was, had I not saved up a good portion of our paycheck, I wouldn't have been able to make this move, because I wouldn't be able to do the things that I'm doing now, because I would have been tied down to the paycheck. So I wouldn't have been able to take the new risks that I'm taking on in order to make more money, because I would have been tied to, like, I can't miss any days in between the switch, and blah blah blah. So you get tied into maybe that toxic situation, or you maybe just don't go out looking for something different, because you're like, no, I'm just getting by and it's okay, and you don't want to take that on. So allowing me to have this conversation with my daughter. We do these all the time, usually once a week or so. You just find yourself in the car on a walk or something, and those are those times that are so impactful, because it's just you and her. There's really nobody else to chime in, offer an opinion. It's just like you are talking directly to that future kid, that future adult inside your own child. And I think those are the things that shaped the way that I see money, and I'm hoping to do that with her.
That's awesome. I love it. I remember those situations with I'm 13 years older than my sister. So I remember those where she would, they're kind of hostage with you in the car so you can just talk to them
Yes.
about whatever.
Yeah.
Um
She's always like,
but
Dad.
yeah, I know the phase very well. If you're not listening on YouTube, he did that perfect. Um so I was going to ask about your goals. So there's always kind of a why behind why you're saving, why you're investing. Of course, security is important. Knowing you can leave your job if you need to is important, like you mentioned, things like that. But do you have any like big, hairy, audacious goals? Are you trying to retire early, or is there anything like that in the future for you guys?
So I haven't even exactly like put a not that you don't think about it, but I haven't put a target on it. Like, everybody's like, "Oh, you want to retire early?" And I'm like, if I got there and I'm going to work towards it, I would be ecstatic. Like, I would be over the moon if we were able to do that. But I really started at 35. And we were always good savers, but I just started investing at 35. So this is a newer process, for us in the family. So, and obviously being on the low income, you have to temper some expectations. Like, I can't retire tomorrow. Even we've done very well. We've saved a ton of money. I can't retire tomorrow. And it probably won't be next year or the next 10. But if we can just keep at it, the options are going to be there. So, there's going to be some things that are optional. But honestly, when I started, it was like, man, what if I could save enough money to have a really big quinceanera for my daughter? Like, how cool would that be? What if I could buy the home that I've always dreamed of, and move my wife and my daughter there? What if I could buy the place that has the fenced-in backyard, and my son and daughter can just go out there and play and frolic? Like, so those are some like near-term things to me that mean much more than retiring early. Don't get me wrong, I love the idea of it, and as it inches closer, it'll be a more serious conversation. But we're in the building. I feel like we're just in this like infancy stage of building what we actually need, in order to do that. And when I'm 50, I'll play this podcast back and be like, Little did he know, like, we're here. But you know, that for me is often the distance. But an absolute goal of mine is, if we could retire early, if I could spend more time with my family, that would mean the world for sure.
Right, and I'm glad that you said that, and you painted a really awesome picture. I love this idea of this 11-year-old and or 12-year-old and this 1-year-old in the backyard and it fenced in, and that paints a picture, and that's very important, and we don't talk about it enough on this podcast. We don't talk about it enough on Money Twitter. Is it's nice to have these goals, these long-term goals, and the retiring early goal, but you have to also live now. You don't wanna look back and you work too long or you save too much and you didn't go on vacation or you didn't have the house that you wanted or you didn't have the lifestyle that you wanted. There's really a delicate balance there.
That's definitely the hardest thing for me to balance is, there's a making with what we make, there's a window there. And, you can't just run off to Vegas, and do that. But you can certainly take the day trips and the weekends overnight and, go see a concert and, just some things like that where you're still enjoying life and, still making those memories with family, but also not breaking, your own goals. You're not to the detriment of yourself there.
Does anybody around you know that you guys are as frugal and investing and things like that?
I'll tell you a story. It's actually a tweet that I need that I need to send out. My grandma just offered to help me pay for a car. So the tweet that I have that's going to go out here soon says, act so broke that your grandma offers to pay for a car for you," because she just has no idea. She's just like, oh, he's had the same car for 14 years. He's now driving around my great grandson in this car that's a junker. It's fine. It's just who I am. I didn't need to upgrade. It gets me from point A to point B. It's a safe car. It's just as safe as the day that I got it. Outside of some bumps and bruises that she's got, she's working just fine. But my grandma literally was like, "If you need help, you just let me know." I'm like, "Grandma, I'll be fine. Trust me, I got this." So act so broke. Your grandma tries to give you money.
I need a minute to recover from that because that was like the perfect answer to that. My cheeks hurt. That was the perfect answer to that question.
I'll send it out tomorrow.
so, so if anybody's listening to this, let's say they're, going to be in their 20s and 30s, probably very similar maybe to the age that you were when you started investing, and that maybe they're feeling a little discouraged right now by the rising cost of things, including homes and things like that. Do you have any words of encouragement or advice for those folks?
So one of the biggest things is probably envy. And if we're honest with each other, you can look like you could I could look at you spoke of your and your husband's salary, and I could say like, man, like what I would do if I just had that salary, or anything. You could be anything in the world. But honestly, I think a lot of people will compare where I'm at, and they'd be like, dude, if I could just save $20,000 a year, like I would be over the moon. And what they don't see are those times where you go, no, I'm not upgrading the car this year. Like we've had this car now for 14 years. We live in a mobile home in Northwest Ohio, and we've been here for 14 years, and it's been paid off, and we've saved every dollar of that payment that used to go into the mobile home is now going into the savings account, and we didn't upgrade, and it's small, it's not big, but it's one of those things that's attributed to us being able to build wealth. And I think a lot of times you say like, man, I just wish I could, get that 20 grand a year saved or whatever. But you don't really see the 10 years prior to that of not necessarily struggle. We enjoy our life. We probably wouldn't do it any other way. But, we turn down a lot of things in the name of building wealth. And I think if you're 20 or 30 and you start looking around and seeing what everybody else has and what you don't, that can be a nail in the coffin for your attitude for whether or not you can actually turn it around for yourself. So, if I could tell you anything, it would be to put blinders on and realize it took us 10 to 15 years of diligent saving in order to get to the point where we could save $20,000 a year. I would say probably 5 years ago, we were only probably saving $5,000 or $6,000 a year. That's barely enough to max your Roth IRA. But it was because every time a bill fell off, that money went right to the savings. And it's a journey. You have the rest of your life to get better every day. So yeah, put those blinders on and really focus on yourself. Don't worry about what others are doing in that regard. And that's probably the best thing I could tell anybody that's listening.
Yeah, I love that. And my husband and I were talking about this recently. And we both have six-figure jobs. And we were talking about like what life could we have if we like lived how normal people with six-figure jobs lived. And we were like, we could have this much payment on a house. We could have this much payment on
Right.
a car. We wouldn't have had to buy this 14-year-old boat. We'd have a brand new boat with a payment on it, and our camper would be twice as big, and we wouldn't have people living in our backyard and all this stuff. And, but part of that, the reason we do any of this at all is so that if I don't love my job, if I wake up tomorrow and I'm like, I don't want to do this ever again, I don't have to.
For
I'm
sure.
33 years old. I don't have to work another day in my life. My husband, he's a little younger. He should really probably work, pay for our health insurance and stuff like that. But we only
For sure.
really need one of these jobs, and even then, we
Correct.
don't even need a full time job, right? So, and yeah, we drive a Forerunner and a Honda Accord, right? I tweeted today. I used to have a BMW. I really liked that BMW, but I didn't like it. I didn't like it enough to work for it,
For sure.
so I think that's fantastic, fantastic, fantastic advice. And something you tweet about a lot are emergency funds. So I thought we should talk about that too. It's a nice idea of, you're going to save, you're going to invest, but if you actually break that down, how much should you have saved before you even start investing, and what steps do you need to take before you get there?
So for me, I've always liked the $1,000 initial emergency fund, and I think I pulled it from Dave Ramsey, but it's just out there everywhere. It's such an obtainable number, and it's such a it's such, I'm not going to say easy, because it's not really easy to do, but when you focused on it, it's that first initial hurdle that will give you the reason to keep going. So you get to that $1,000 emergency fund, you go like, dude, I did it. And that puts you ahead of, I think it was something like 50% of
Yeah.
Americans can't cover
Yes.
an emergency of $1,000. And I'm
Yeah.
just like, that's such a crazy thing to think about. And so for me, getting to that $1,000 sets you so far apart, just in the grand scheme of things. So that was my first goal, was to get that $1,000 in savings.
That encourages you. That gets you the point where there's money that you don't spend. There is a mindset there and a comfort with having money that you don't spend that I think a lot of people don't understand. It's almost like once you get in that mindset, the sky's the limit because you get used to there being money you don't touch, and that's huge, and that's what you
Absolutely.
have to do.
Yep. One of the things for me is, I read a book called The Secret, and it's kind of kitschy, but they talked about the mail, and I would go to the mail, and it was always just bills, and I was like, Jesus, I was pulling my hair out. It's just bills every time I go. I hated going to the mail, to the point where my mailbox was so full at the park that I live in, they ship it back to the place, and you have to
Yep.
go pick it up. And
Yeah.
then the lady was like, you have to come get your mail more often, or that's just going to keep coming back here. And I go, well, is it just junk mail and bills? And she's like, well, yeah. And I go, I don't want it. You can keep it. Like, I don't want, like, it was almost like a conversation with them. But I knew like something had to change there. And what changed was I didn't have enough money to pay the bills. So I was extremely concerned when like a new bill would pop up,
Yeah.
because it was always, something else going to hit the wallet. But the moment I had that $1,000 emergency fund, like, I stopped having emergencies. It's just a beautiful thing that happens when you're
Yes.
prepared for it. They're way less impactful.
Yes, that is true. That is true. And because if you don't have an emergency fund at all, $10 becomes an emergency, right?
Yep.
And then it can just easily snowball, from there. So you've talked about emergency funds. when you're investing, you mentioned Roth IRAs briefly. Is that where you're putting money mostly into retirement accounts?
Yes. So currently, as it stands up today, I don't have access to a 401k. So I've been in the restaurant industry nearly my entire life, and the benefits there are just not good.
Yeah.
New York is actually talking about like doing like a something like a simple IRA for folks that don't have a access to a 401k. And I'm just like, man, if they could do that for the retail industry and the service industry, you would actually attract people back to those jobs,
Yeah.
which would kind of be a solution to the problem that you have of currently not being able to find enough people to work those jobs, at least in my humble opinion.
Agree.
But you can't raise a family on those salaries, and you can't invest for retirement on those salaries. And most of those places don't have benefits. They're not attracting new. There's no reason for me to go to that job. But that's always been the industry that I've been in. I've always been extremely passionate about food and food service. Um, it has treated me well, but I've put a ton of hours,
Yeah.
into that. So that's always been difficult. But as it stands right now, I don't have access to a 401k. So I do tweet a lot about the Roth IRA, because as somebody from the industry, I always will tell people in the service and retail, the absolute best thing you can do is max your Roth IRA. If you did nothing else than doing that, you'd be so far ahead of the average person by just maxing your Roth. Like the only thing you ever did was that you would stumble into a half decent retirement.
And you are ahead of a lot of people that make easily six figures by doing that, by the way. Like you're not just ahead of other people in your
Yeah.
industry when you do that. So you're maxing your Roth and then what, brokerage account, the rest of it?
Yeah, so I just go to the brokerage after that, because if you make under a certain amount, your brokerage becomes a baby Roth anyway. So if it got to the point where I did no longer have a salary, I think it's like 80,000. So as long as I make less than 80,000 a year, none of the gains are taxed anyways if I hold it for that long. So on my current salary, um, I could I could technically take out like another 30,000 of capital gains every year, as if it was that I had that in there. But I could technically take that out and still not pay anything on the taxes because of the income that you're at. So when you're at this salary range, the taxable becomes a nice deal. Obviously, the thing I miss out on the most is not having the 401k match. That's
Yeah.
the tough part, because that's obviously compensation and free money from your employer. I will be working towards that here soon.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to hearing more about that when you're ready to share about your job
Yeah.
change. Is there anything else you want to add, Chad, before we wrap up?
No, I think I'm good. I think we touched everything that I needed to talk about.
Yeah, this was great. I'm so glad that we brought you on, and I think listeners are going to get a lot out of it. Why don't you tell people how to get in touch with you? I mean, you got to tell them about your Twitter. We've mentioned that quite a bit.
Yeah, so that's my main platform. Is I just enjoy the short little blurb something out into the world and hope people relate to it. So it's on Twitter, and it's Chad Money Matter on Twitter.
You can find me on Twitter at Adulting is Easy. I'm not as good at it as Chad, but follow me anyways. I started a YouTube channel. This will be posted there on video. So if you're listening, you can check that out as well. I'm on Facebook. You can email me at realadultingiseasy@gmail.com. Thanks again for listening, everybody. Hopefully, Chad and I have made adulting a little easier for you.